why not put your money to work?
Xethalis, right?
Xethalis.
Xethalis. That's Irish, right?
It is. I'm married Irish, but belovedly Greek.
Okay, so walk us through like the last 4 years going from briefcase to backpack. How has sort of the crypto landscape's evolution almost mirrored your own habiliment evolution?
Well, so
For people who got like a bad score on the SAT, habiliments refer to your clothing, your accoutrements, as it were.
So I was in big law for about 15 years, but I actually started representing crypto people in 2012. So I got pilled relatively early, but it didn't generally change my wardrobe. It really was moving from representing centralized institutions and funds to going in-house and working with the devs that I realized you really have to dress the part. And sometimes in this role, the amount of time we spend in DC, I'll still have to break out a briefcase, but yeah, you do change and your perspective changes.
So from the perspective of folks within the Beltway, their perspective obviously has changed about crypto. We see it in the headlines. We see it in sort of the extent to which lawmakers are now advocating for crypto. Is that real, or is that just sort of like, political theater?
I don't think it's political theater. I would actually take it as capturing an opportunity. Real legislation, impactful legislation, only comes around every so often.
What do you mean by that? Like, most of the time it is political theater, but sometimes something is captured in the zeitgeist that gets people excited.
Well, I think it's partially getting excited about the technology. I think that's fewer and farther between in DC because, let's be clear, this is not an easy technology to understand. And there is a generational gap in that. But the opportunity is, A, understanding that technology leads to economic prosperity. Historically, that's been the case. It's a disruption as well. It can change the way societies operate. But generally speaking, technology is equated to progress, including social and economic progress. But the opportunity for a lot of people on the Hill, particularly those actually working on this legislation, and for a number of them, it's been 5, 6, 7 years working on this. It's not politics, it's legacy. And it's the opportunity to work on something that matters in an environment where bills don't pass very often. They're not bipartisan. They're not going to be something that is, when I say impactful, I mean real, substantive. The Genius Act, which passed a little over a month ago, is one of the most impactful bills that we have seen come out of DC, certainly since Dodd-Frank, 15 years later. And I think the legislators and their staff who worked on that, particularly Senator Haggerty, Senator Lummis, Senator Scott, Senator Alsobrooks, Senator Gillibrand, who were the sponsoring team in the Senate, all of their staffs, as well as the people in the House on Patrick McHenry's team and French Hill's team, who really led the way on the McWaters, the McHenry Waters, or McWaters version 3 years ago. This is an opportunity to work on something that will be referenced on the books for a very long time. And for a lot of staffers and a lot of legislators, that's a legacy.
So that kind of tees up a very interesting question, which only someone like you can answer. Oftentimes in my old seat, and then now in my current seat, I try to glean the perspective of how does the current political approach to crypto reflect crypto's maturation as an asset? But I think you can answer a more interesting question of how does Washington's approach to crypto illustrate how Washington might be changing, or something unique about the political dynamics within the Beltway?
Yeah, I think
does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And I'll attack it two ways. One, I do think in the last election cycle, a lesson not learned in the prior cycle was that there are pro-crypto voters and there really aren't anti-crypto voters.
Yep.
So that has been a lesson learned. And
But is that a meta lesson within a larger political message of, I don't know, identity politics, or the way in which the electorate is now changing?
well, I think there's a significant generational component, clearly. I know that's not exactly what you were going at,
No, but that's,
but I think that there is a
if anything, it illustrates the extent to which our lawmakers are maybe older than the electorate writ large.
yes. And they also historically were dealing with people within DC, policy people, lawyers, who were representative of the traditional incumbents. And the industry has engaged on a political basis, on a grassroots basis on that political side, not just big dollar contributions, but also engaged with boots on the ground, if you will, spending time. All of the trade associations do fly-in days, founders, policy people, big organizations hiring policy teams, growing their legal teams to be on the ground and articulate the issues. I have the pleasure of being on the board of both the Blockchain Association and an affiliate of the DeFi Education Fund, and the work that organizations like they and CCI and the Digital Chamber are all doing, that has led us to this groundswell of this moment where legislation can actually pass, and the staff on the Hill can understand what that legislation needs to be to fit this new technology. So there is a sea change there. I think that is a significant component of it. I think there also is a sea change of understanding that we're dealing with a technology that has the ability to change the way we regulate financial institutions.
Source.
And Chair Atkins, in his speech 2 weeks ago at AFPI, after the release of the President's Working Group report, talked about this very point, that the federal securities laws, as well as the commodities laws and the banking laws, have always assumed the existence, and he said assumed, I would say relied on the existence of intermediaries who sit at the middle and can see the field, and the government can deputize them. And Chair Atkins said,
to do their sort of like, basically to do the work of transparency on their behalf.
Exactly. And Chair Atkins made the point that, we shouldn't force intermediation when there are alternative means. And blockchains are inherently transparent systems, and we should tap into that and create regulation, in the words of Chair Atkins, the minimum effective dose of regulation to achieve our core policy goals.
Which is transparency for the consumer.
Transparency, reducing information asymmetries, and giving the core protections that we need while still allowing for competitiveness so that American consumer ideals and norms can be what populate blockchains.
Now, one question that I think would surface for someone who maybe sits on the more left-leaning side of the aisle is around how do we protect the consumer?
Mm-hmm.
And from my perspective, or from my seat, it doesn't seem as apparent, or it seems almost like a meme, right? That like the core transparent nature of the blockchain in of itself provides some form of consumer protection. To someone like an Elizabeth Warren might turn their nose up at that. How do we mollify their concerns, right? Because at the end of the day, a lot of what crypto has been is centralized firms kind of taking this volatile asset class and almost putting into a black box.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess, like, to rephrase the question, how do we really make that transparency element, that narrative, sing louder to people who are concerned about consumer protections?
So I think the first thing we do is create regulatory frameworks for the centralized intermediaries in crypto. And that's what we effectively did with Genius. And that's what we're looking to do with market structure legislation.
Do they understand the difference, or is the difference between the centralized entities and the decentralized entities, is that more apparent now than it was 2 years ago?
I think so. And certainly we have, the chair of the SEC, the chair of the CFTC, the president, the Treasury Secretary, and the leadership on a bicameral basis of the applicable banking, financial services, and agriculture committees coming out and talking about the importance of allowing decentralized systems to operate. And if you look at the legislation that's been pushed forward, we're regulating the stablecoin issuers,
Yeah.
the most centralized you can get, the trading platforms, the brokers, the dealers. But we're also leaving a carve out where we're not touching true decentralized finance. And this is actually a return to the very first government guidance that was ever issued on crypto, which was May 2013, the FinCEN guidance, which talked about the difference between exchangers and users and administrators, and talked about the idea that you regulate the centralized choke points, but you allow a system that has different risks. And our financial regulatory infrastructure to date is attacking those intermediaries or deputizing and regulating those intermediaries because that is the situs of counterparty risk. And our system looks at counterparty risk, systemic risks, and how to deal with it in an intermediated finance way. When we move into DeFi, we're dealing with different risks. We're dealing with code risk, audit risk, hacking risk. And we have to address information asymmetries. And how do we push out information? Because not everyone is going to be able to read a GitHub.
Certainly not me.
I can't either. But it being open source helps. It being fully transparent helps. And we need to figure out, okay, what are the frameworks we need in place? And how do we incentivize those proper disclosures to reduce core information asymmetry? And at a certain point, also, we have to grapple with what in crypto is buyer beware versus what is going to be in the any state world. And my favorite mayor of New York is Mike Bloomberg. You got to pay an extra 50 cents to get a big gulp if there's sugar in it, and you can't smoke in a bar anymore. I'm okay with those. But there's a point where the nanny state and the buyer beware have to meet. And where we meet there is on our core policy goal of economic opportunity and American competitiveness. And it's not going to be at one end or the other.
And crypto is a great sandbox for our political discourse to figure out that happy medium.
Yes, the golden mean, or the golden meme.
There's so many memes.
Yes.
There's a lot of, we could talk for like 17 hours probably, but one thing that you mentioned before we turned on the mics was a joke you used to make about, we don't have to go through the joke, but about a certain asset being a security or not.
Mm-hmm.
And that seemed to be such a big question that hung over the space, right? That's a security. This isn't a security. Why is security such a dirty word? And doesn't need to be. I mean, some things should be a security, and maybe the 1934 Security Act works well for certain things, or maybe not. I don't know.
We can call it an emotional support issuance, and that'd be a little bit better than a security. No, but I think so.
Like should we just completely move, reconfigure everything in this new paradigm?
We'll probably touch on that with Chair Atkins' speech, but I think the biggest difference between today and the ICO boom is understanding the distinction between the asset and the transaction. So the ICO boom was replete with unregistered securities offerings.
Yeah.
The difference is it was the ICO that was the unregistered security, not the token. Now, there certainly are tokens that will be securities. BIDL is the best example. USDC is not a security, but it's a monetary instrument regulated now under Genius. There will be tokenized stocks all over the globe, and there will be tokenized debts. I actually think it's quite interesting that I think NFTs are going to be a tremendous form or media for debt instruments that can potentially in the future facilitate trade. And so certainly there are tokens that can be securities, but every single one of those has one distinct feature, which is a legal relationship between the token holder and an issuer, some sort of right that can be exercised. And in crypto, I think the aha moment when you understand this distinction is when you grasp that tokens grant you powers within a system in accordance with the rules of those systems. They don't necessarily grant you rights. where rights can be granted is in an offering, particularly a fundraising offering, whether it's a Howie offering or a Reg DA offering or what have you. And I think we're really focusing on that point. And I think in the discussion draft that the Senate put out and in Clarity, there's slightly different angles that are all driving towards the same goal, which is trying to get capital formation, trying to reduce information asymmetries, and trying to find a path for this industry to grow.
It's funny. I feel like this conversation around asymmetric information really makes me think about all the memes around our congressional leadership and the extent to which they're maybe trading on information that isn't available to the public, which I think you've tweeted about.
I might have stayed away from that one.
So then maybe we'll stay away from it.
I do think, we have to understand where conflicts of interest lie in.
They still exist.
Yeah. And sitting in a fund world, my number one job as general counsel and when I wore our CCO hat is thinking about how we address conflicts of interest. Some of those relate to information asymmetries. And that's really where our financial laws principally target is make sure there's disclosure, make sure investors have the opportunity to make informed choices and also informed choices that are broad.
What conversations are people having at this event? What's sort of been a standout combo that you've had or some threads or some themes that are relevant to the market?
First, a fantastic event. Had the pleasure of coming last year. I think it was.
Have you seen any moose yet?
I have not seen any moose.
I saw a baby moose on one of my hikes.
Really?
Yeah.
What? How tall?
On Jenny Lake. Oh, I mean, it must have been like this big.
Now, when you see that, you just got to be careful for mama moose.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. But I've not seen any wildlife. I haven't seen that many NFTs or memes either. Fortunately, no bears. But
well, I don't know. Have you looked at the market today? There's the bears are out in force.
But it's been a great set of conversations.
What are people focused on?
The event is probably about twice as big as it was last year. Chair Atkins gave a great speech on Project Crypto. Senator Scott's been around talking about his vision of trying to get market structure done. I think there is a lot of enthusiasm, especially out of the Atkins speech. I think it'll be months before people really realize how important that was. But we're in an entirely different place. A year ago, we didn't know what this industry was going to look like. There's a greater push towards bipartisanship. There's a greater push towards... So I would flip it maybe. I had breakfast this morning with Rebecca Rettig from Jito. And I think one of the most rewarding things in this entire cycle for me was Rebecca and I and Lucas Bruder and Kyle Samani walking in on February 5th to the SEC and had the first non-trade association meeting with the crypto task force. And it's the opportunity to go in with, whether it's legislators or regulators, have constructive conversations, identify the problems that people in industry are seeing, and having regulators or legislators or policy leaders who actually want to assess the situation and say, hey, is there something for us to do here? And sure enough, the issue that we saw that Rebecca and I went in on February 5th, 6 months later to the day, we saw liquid staking token guidance come out of the SEC. This is a GSD type of administration, get shit done.
Yeah.
That's the great part. And that's what people are talking about.
Well, it's like, moving with this, at least a fraction of the speed of the industry, which I think, blacklisting it is one thing, but just like being slow is almost just as bad. Like even if you have administrations and agencies that are not anti-crypto, if they're just not moving with the same speed as crypto, that's still problematic.
There's got to be a degree of flexibility and there's got to be a degree of focus from the regulators because the industry does need oversight in some regards. Some of that should be self-regulatory commercial norms and some of that...
And that's good for investors, right? Like here, it's like, you don't want a completely free range of everything because...
Wild West is bad.
Then, you might make a bet on a project that... might turn sideways because there wasn't some layer of oversight.
That's correct. And It is fast moving. My favorite way to describe crypto is actually by going back to a Greek philosopher, Heraclitus.
We bring it all back to
Always
the Greeks.
comes back to the Greeks.
Every
Greeks invented crypto.
Did they?
Yes, absolutely. Why do they called crypto? But Heraclitus said tapantare, which is the stream flows. Everything always changes. You never step in the same river twice because the water goes. And crypto is the mighty Mississippi. This thing is cooking. And it's why it's one of the most amazing industries to be in, particularly when you have a legal and policy focus, because we're looking at things in new ways, and issues are, being thrown at us in a million different directions all at once. You don't really have the opportunity to sleep, but you can dream just in your day to day.
Yeah. And to the naysayers, we say, Ella, Ella,
Ella,
Ella.
Ella. Yeah.
That means come here in Greek.
Yep.
Thanks so much, Greg.
Absolutely.
Pleasure. Kristin Smith, thanks so much for taking the time.
It's wonderful to be here. Frank.
Okay, so you have a new job. I have a new job. How's the Solana policy? Yeah, literally to the east side. How's the Institute? We'll call it the Institute.
The Institute.
How's the Institute treating you?
So much.
It sounds like the asylum. How's it like on the inside the asylum?
It's really cool. Solana is a very cool community, and they're doing a lot of cool stuff, and it's fun to be able to focus on one particular thing. It's also fun to work with a small team. I do very well with really small teams, I think, because I like to know what everybody's doing, and we've got that. But we've also got a lot of resources to do everything we want to do in Washington. So I think that as we are transitioning to this new era that we're in, there is a lot of detail work that needs to be done. The big picture political stuff has been solved, and so we're diving in. So I love it. It's been a really good move. I always was obviously bittersweet, as I'm sure it was for you, to build something, and but it's in good hands, and I'm really happy.
Well, before we turn on the mics, we were kind of being a bit nostalgic, thinking about how you were first off, you, I think, either were tied with one Sam Bankman-Fried or surpassed him eventually.
I think I've surpassed him.
Yeah,
He's not supposed to do podcasts anymore.
Exactly. So he's not going to come on the show. But you came on the Scoop 8 times, I think, and were the 6th guests on the show back when we were in a WeWork 7 years ago. Now, back then, right, like so much of your job was just going to the Hill and explaining to not congressmen, but their staffers, like interns, what Bitcoin and crypto is. And I don't know if it was you that I was joking about this with, or Niraj or someone else, but now I was like, when you think about the environment we're in, where clearly crypto has a is viewed more favorably in the eyes of regulators and policymakers. What is it that you now have to do? And of course, there's a lot of minutia. There's a lot of, when we think about some of the bills that are working their way through the Hill, there's tiny tweaks. Everybody has their own opinion of what should be focused on or highlighted. Maybe just give us the juxtaposition of 7 years ago to today.
Yeah. Well, actually, I would put a little twist on it. My job 7 years ago, yes, was to go talk about blockchain to Congress and the regulators, which was, I look back on it at the time, I had no idea what I was doing, and but I did it anyway. Or heard it out as I went. But no, the real challenge we had was trying to convince industry that they needed to engage in Washington. And I think if I look in, back to 2018 versus where we are today, the biggest difference is that Washington has stepped up in a really big way crypto has stepped up in a really big way in Washington. I think the industry as a whole is the most powerful, most influential force in DC. And we've had success. We've turned the boat around. I mean, we were a sinking ship. There were torpedoes at us from every direction, and we were going down. And by all the hard work that the industry did by coming together and working together, we've turned a corner. And obviously, we now have the Genius Act, and we have the president's report that lays out a blueprint. We have Chair Atkins, who has his project Crypto and is going to provide a bunch of guidance and other types of exempt for relief, et cetera. So we are in such a better place, but it was like pulling teeth back then to get companies to join the Blockchain Association or to donate to a political champion or any of that. And it's completely changed today.
Now the money seems to be more abundant than ever. I mean, if we're using that ship analogy, right? The armada that saved our existing fleet was Fairshake with probably, I mean, the biggest pact in political history.
Yeah, at least from a corporate spend, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you've had larger political PACs, that are focused on more ideological causes. But no, this is really the first time that corporations in an industry have said, we need to change the direction that we're going, and we're going to spend big. And I think one of the things that's really cool about crypto is they're into transparency. You'll have a lot of industries that want to influence political outcomes, but they don't do it in a transparent way. What they'll do is they'll give to a 501c4 organization, and those donations are anonymous, and then that C4 will run ads, etc. No, with a super PAC like Fairshake, you know who's donating, you know where the money's going, and it had a really big impact because everybody in DC, knows what's going on, and so it's played a really big role, I think, in helping to turn this around. But it's not just the super PAC spend. It's the fact that this does actually emerge in the polling. There is like a crypto voter. That is a real thing. And there are very active crypto advocates.
You don't want to invite them to your parties, but they are very active and vibrant in their tenacity.
We love it when crypto advocates come to our parties. We had some show up at our lunch break.
So I'm sure listeners are familiar with the current landscape, and hopefully this will still be timely in a month or whenever this might air. There's the Genius Act, obviously. There's the market structure, stablecoin developments that are kind of coming to fruition. But maybe break down the landscape from a crypto company perspective. Is everyone aligned? Are there any factions emerging? Like, what are the interests?
Interesting question. Listen, everyone is not universally aligned, right? This is human nature and corporate nature is you're going to look at, all right, what is my business? What do I care about? What do I need for my organization to succeed? I think that is a very normal and natural thing. And I think, what we see are exchanges are very interested in having a market structure bill with straight preemption. You have kind of the DeFi community that's like, all right, we'll do that, but not, to sacrifice DeFi. There's different pieces of it that have different interests. I think overall, everybody is on the same page. Like they want the US to be the leader, and they want the regulatory environment to be one that allows for competition and allows the little pie we have today to become a great big giant pie. This is very much, a positive sum game. And so, I think we'll get there. I think the way the Genius Act played out worked really well all around and had a lot of balance. Market structure, I think, is going to be a little bit more difficult, but it's hugely important that we get that right. I think what I actually think is the most important thing going on in Washington right now is not so much the work that's going on in Congress, which is very important, but the work going on at the SEC where Project Crypto. Chair Atkins is here in Wyoming. I believe he might even be speaking as we're recording this right now. But his speech that he gave at the end of July, I think was one of the most important moments in the history of all crypto. He basically said, we want to bring assets on chain, and we're going to figure out the best way to do that. And that's going to protect consumers. And we want to protect DeFi. And we believe in self-custody and some things that were pretty wild given where the SEC was even just a year ago. So I think that we're going to get there. It might not be as clean as, hey, here's a market structure bill, go. I think what was really cool about the White House's report that they put out is you can go to the back section. It has a whole table of here's the general category, here's the sub issue, and here's either the agency or Congress that needs to take the lead. it really breaks it down. And I think that that's the type of leadership that we need to move forward. And that's going to happen over the next, 12 to 24 months. We'll really get all this stuff done. So it's really exciting.
It seems like the posture of the SEC under the Biden administration was basically, you can't do crypto and have consumer protection. The only way to protect consumers is to offshore crypto and work as hard as possible to make the rails unavailable to Americans.
Correct.
And this administration, is there a concern maybe that we're going too far in the other direction where there's not enough?
I don't think we're going too far in the other direction. First of all, I think you can have really strong consumer protections with crypto rails. That it's not like we're giving up those. It's in some ways they're better, right? Because you don't have to rely on a centralized intermediary that could go lose your funds or something like that. I think there is a way to do it where consumers are protected. I'm really, really encouraged by talking to Congress, because when we talk to Congress on both sides of the aisle, there is a lot of interest. The big driver is age at this point. So we still have some of the older members of Congress that are not internet native, let alone crypto native, that, just don't quite understand what's going on here. And so, but that'll change over time. And I think the younger members of Congress get it. There's no upside to being anti-crypto. And,
Yeah, there's probably it's almost probably fair to say there's no sub 50-year-old congressmen or senators. There's probably no sub 50-year-old senators, but sub 50-year-old Congress folks that are anti-crypto.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably a couple, but no, for the most part, if you look at the ages, it's the younger members get it, and they're excited about it, and they're excited about technology. I think the problem we had with the prior administration is they just didn't like technology. They didn't see technology as a solution. They didn't see it as a driver of innovation, which in turn drives economic growth, and that's been completely turned on its head. So we're in a much better place now.
So you mentioned that the SEC's Project Crypto is probably the biggest thing to happen to the industry from a regulatory policy perspective ever. What's so significant in that? Just sort of the ability to test the waters, a sort of sandbox, and what you can operate.
Well, I think it's more than testing the waters. They want to. They want to pave the way for this technology to be adopted. It's if you haven't watched it, anybody out there, I highly encourage you to go.
The new Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
Go watch it.
Go watch it.
No, actually, it was really good.
Yeah, but it was really.
So what do they need to actually watch?
Well, okay. If you think about some of the problems we've had as an industry, one of them is we've had a difficult time with interacting with regulators over determining what's a commodity and what's a security. And Atkins comes straight out of the gate and says, we are going to solve this question. We're going to find a way to do distributions of tokens in the US. And oh, by the way, if you are deemed a security, that's going to be okay, because we're going to put the infrastructure in place for those to be issued, to be traded, and to have the disclosures. And so what's really interesting about it is the SEC actually does have a lot of power to help crypto. There's some things they can't do. They can't go and regulate the spot market. But what they can do is provide ways for security tokens and non-security token assets to trade on the same venue, which then provides a lot of regulatory cover for those crypto commodity spot markets. So, we're going to have ways to do new token issuances. We're going to have ways to determine which regulatory regime they fall into. We're going to have ways for those to trade together. And then the one that I think is most important, particularly from the Solana perspective, where we're building internet capital markets and we want to have the rails for all sorts of assets to trade, is that he said we want to bring securities online. We want to allow for tokenization, and we want the market to innovate in this space and do it in a way that improves our capital formation here in the United States. So it was pretty visionary and pretty remarkable, and about as far apart as you could get from where Gary Gensler was at before.
So walk us through the landscape for stablecoin providers. Obviously, we talk about different interests. I'm sure some folks obviously want to advocate for the traditional sort of way in which we think about a stable coin. And then obviously there's other market participants like Athena, which have a different model. Where are we landing in terms of sort of a holistic approach where everyone can kind of, where the entire pie can grow, not just specific types of stablecoin providers?
Yeah. Well, I think the framework's there, right? The Genius Act has been signed into law, which I did go to the White House, by the way. It was really cool. Donald Trump knows how to put on a show like none other. Like the anticipation of his arrival into the room was like a Taylor Swift concert. It was like unbelievable. And again, a total 180 from where we were a year ago. But you know, that's been passed. There are certain deadlines for rulemakings and implementations that the different agencies have that are involved. And I think that we'll see, you know, in the next 12 to 18 months, that regulatory framework get into place. Foreign issuers have a little bit of longer time to figure out how to comply if they want to operate in the United States. But I think what's really interesting is I don't think it's going to be just the world of Circle and Tether, and you know, others with deeper knowledge may disagree, but it seems to me that the banks are all looking at this.
Yeah.
There's a huge interest in figuring out how to grow this. And so I think we're going to see new stablecoin issuers. I think we're going to see new models, and, you know, they'll all have to work within that framework if they want to be a payment stablecoin and have, you know, the rights that are sort of granted to those issuers of payment stablecoins. But no, I think it's gonna change pretty dramatically going forward. But also be a huge opportunity for those who've been those issuers that have been doing the work over the past, you know, 7+ years.
How much is the vested interest of these large financial institutions, which are all quite keen to break into the stablecoin space, an impediment for crypto native market participants? I'm sure you saw. I forget if it was a bank industry group or a specific
Yeah,
bank
there was a group.
going to blow up deposits, right? You know,
Right.
the multi-trillion
Yeah,
deposits.
you have the payments companies that are looking at this as an opportunity. You do have the banks that are now they've done several letters, and you'll see an op-ed here or there, et cetera. They're very worried that some of these companies are offering rewards on stable coins, you know, maybe some of the exchanges, et cetera, that, you know, they think are not in the spirit of the Genius Act. The Genius Act did not go to the point where it allows for the holder of the stablecoin to have yield. That is not allowed. The banks push back pretty hard on that. But now they're going after some of the arrangements that are out there. You know, when I look at it, it's like, guys, that bill was signed into law last month, like, and the rules are pretty clear. So you're a little bit late to the game
Yeah.
at this point. And I think it really shows that there was
How slow they are.
yeah, I mean, I think there was a thinking within not everyone at some of these banks, but a lot of people at these banks that crypto wasn't real, that all these companies were getting debanked, right? Like they have not been able to pivot quickly enough to realize that the world has completely changed, and that, you know,
I mean, now they're just kind of screaming into the air like the proverbial old man.
yes. And I think, listen, they'll continue to talk about that and have some challenges. We're seeing this a little bit on the tokenization side as well. SIFMA, which is sort of the leading organization, has written a lot of letters that they want a lot of process, and they want, you know, they're very concerned about some of the arrangements that are out there with tokenized securities today. But I think it's I think it's really short-sighted on their part. I think the better move by both the banks and the securities industry is to figure out how to take advantage of this new technology. Because as I was talking about before, when you lower the cost, when you make it easier to issue a security, or you make it you know, easier for people around the globe to invest in a security, like this is great for capital formation, and it lowers the cost. It makes it easier to go public.
Sure.
You can have more people come in. So these are really desirable public policy goals. And I think, you know, I think, you know, there's going to take some time for people to pivot. I think you and I are probably on X all day long, consuming
Yeah.
new information, analyzing, processing, trying to keep up with everything going on. And I don't think this is an industry that's had to deal with rapid change like this before. And so it's a little bit of a wake-up call.
Okay, so for some of these Luddites who might be listening, maybe they work at a big bank, P. Morgan or Bank of America. What should they be paying attention to over the course of to the end of the year?
Well, I think there's two big themes on a very high level. One that we've talked about a little bit is tokenization. Derivatives are going on chain, securities, equities, debt going on chain. I think real estate eventually will go on chain. At some point, we are going to have all assets on chain. I think that's inevitable. It could take 10 years. It could take 20 years to do that. I mean, I think I just saw the other day they are finally, I think AT&T is getting rid of dial-up modem. Like, yeah, that's about time. These transitions take time. But I think we're going to see a lot of that activity go on chain, which again will enable new types of services when you hook it up to DeFi and you can use those assets as collateral and things like that. So I think institutions, TradFi, banks, they should be looking at tokenization for opportunities. But then from the investor side, you see institutional investors like want to get access to crypto assets and crypto companies. I mean, we're seeing new ETF applications and a new generic listing standard that will probably be issued soon by the SEC. We're very hopeful. We think we'll have Solana ETFs very shortly, which is exciting. We're seeing these digital asset treasury companies that are exploding. I mean, happy to chat more about that. And we see a lot of crypto companies that are going public. We've seen it with Circle. We saw it with Bullish recently. They're coming out of the gate, and investors are eating up these assets.
Insatiable appetite.
Yeah, depending on where you sit in one of these traditional institutions, I think tokenization and just it's ironic, right? It's the crypto industry wrapped in an equity shell that is now giving more people the ability to invest in it. It's like almost ironic in a way, but those are the two I think themes of this summer that we're starting to see.
And then let's maybe take a moment to close out and think about from the Institute perspective, what's going to be your focus over the next few months?
Yeah, well, we're focused on figuring out what specifically needs to happen at the SEC in order to bring more assets, more securities on chain. I think that's probably our biggest issue. And I think that, in addition to that, we care very much about developer rights. And so anything that we can do to get the Blockchain Regulatory Certainty Act, which is, would solve the Roman storm issue we have. Sure. That's a priority for us. And then, of course, the market structure legislation, I think, is really important to get right. And there are a lot of people working really hard on that right now. And we could see some progress on that this year or potentially next year as well. And so, yeah, anytime Washington is doing something that impacts the Solana community, we want to be in the room, and so far we've been able to do that.
Well, we appreciate you taking the time and wish you the best of luck.
Yes, well, you too, Frank.
Thank
I think
you.
it's exciting about your move, and I think they're very lucky at GSR to have you.
Oh, please be still. My beating hurt. Talk to you soon.
All right.
Jonathan, Jachym, thanks for having this event. Obviously, this is the second year that Kraken's doing this. You guys have a storied history here in Wyoming. I think you guys set up some sort of bank back in 2020, and now in June, you guys set up your headquarters here in the state. How's the conference been? Like, this is the second rodeo, no pun intended. What are people talking about? What conversations are you having? Peek behind the curtain for the audience.
Yeah, look, thanks for having me. We're excited. This is our second year. It's a much bigger event than it was last year. Bringing together industry participants, government, policymakers. So it's a big cross section of the debate right now. And look, we're happy to do this in Wyoming. Wyoming's been a big part of Kraken's history. We have a state chartered bank here that was licensed in 2020. So us announcing our headquarters is part of that growing Wyoming story for us.
And why Wyoming? I feel like a lot of people, even in my friend group, are like, why are you going to Jackson Hole? Is it just because of the Fed meeting, or is there something that's happening from a crypto perspective that's worth paying attention
Yeah,
to?
well, look, you can't beat Jackson weather in August, and the beautiful scenery, obviously. But yeah, there's a lot going out here this time of year. Different government meetings, a lot of congressional leaders are out this way. The big talk of the town right now is the policy debate. So, we're trying to get market structure legislation done in Congress. There's a lot going on with the administration. So there's, a lot of business to talk about, but there's a lot on the policy front, which is being discussed on the sidelines here.
What is like the perfect outcome from a market structure bill perspective, stablecoin bill perspective? What is Kraken's sort of position on what crypto capital markets should look like
Yeah. So for those not steeped in the policy day to day,
for normal people?
for most people out there that don't live and breathe this every day, you can sort of think of it this way: for centralized intermediaries like Kraken, we have long been a big interface point with the industry, and most other major jurisdictions around the world have just gotten on with putting basic rules of the road in place. Europe's a good example of that. We've been licensed there.
You guys have Mika or
Yeah, there's a MiCA license. We're regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland. So, where this became a unnecessary political football in the U.S., most other major G10, G20 markets just got on with it.
Yeah.
And a lot of them are 2-3 years ahead of the United States right now. So, we've made a lot of progress, but the urgency and the window to get this done is now. And fortunately, we have great leadership. Back to the Wyoming story, Senator Cynthia Lummis has been an incredible champion, for the industry before a lot of others were. And, she's taken that leadership and the trust that's been placed in her, and the collaboration with Senate Banking Chairman Tim Scott is really been pivotal for our ability to advance a market structure bill. So the stablecoin bill is done. It's great. We were big supporters. We were really pleased to be at the White House for the ceremony. I mean, it was a monumental moment in crypto policy history in the United States. But stablecoins, even though it's a very, very important part of the market, is only one segment of the market. The market structure bill, in a nutshell, is just going to allow centralized exchanges and other intermediaries like Kraken to go in and register and put clear rules of the road in place so we can get on with innovating, creating new products, listing new tokens, similar to what we've seen in other parts of the world.
So when we think about the market structure bill and just like what an ideal market structure looks like, what is Kraken advocating for? Obviously, the one element of crypto's market structure that's different, and we saw in the litany of unfortunate cases brought against so many legitimate companies in this space by the previous administration, is the fact that our companies in crypto, because crypto is so unique and blends so many markets together, operates on different planes, right? So an exchange might also do some OTC. They might also do some venture investing. They're doing obviously retail brokerage, institutional brokerage. So the market structure is different. With that market structure mental model in place, what type of parameters are you guys advocating for in terms of a market structure bill?
Yeah, so I think, two big components of it, right? The one is the financing element of this, right? So investors want to go and finance a project. You have a project team, they have a great idea, they're developing a protocol, and they need funding. And so the big debate and challenge up until now in the old regulation by enforcement environment is, how do you treat tokens that are associated with that primary financing transaction? I'm an investor, you're a project.
Yeah.
I give you cash, tokens are part of that transaction. What is the legal status of those tokens?
Yeah.
And so the market structure bill that's being debated in the House and Senate solves that, right? And everyone agrees that those tokens trading on secondary markets are not securities. The courts have agreed. And finally, we have legislation that's been moving through Congress that's going to provide federal clarity on the question. So that's the first component of that. in that area, I think the message from Kraken and from other participants is we got to keep it simple,
Yeah.
right? If we make this costlier for project development teams, if we create complex tests and lockup provisions and things that make it more expensive or make it more complex, the lawyers win and the project teams and innovators lose. So our big goal has been, let's make sure that what we put in place on the project financing and capital fundraising side of this is clear, simple, and allows the U.S. to remain competitive in order to bring investment back to the United States. Rather than, what we've seen in the past is a lot of the innovation and a lot of the venture investment has just simply moved offshore. The second part of it that's really important is allowing exchanges like Kraken and our peers to have a clear framework to go in and register, in our case with the CFTC as an exchange, and we'd have a listings policies and procedures in place.
Interesting. Which is really necessary. I think that even within crypto, like there are so many question marks around what parameters are in place for a new token to get listed by an exchange. And it feels like at the end of the day, like the exchanges that's kind of been coming up with that framework on their own, but it would probably be more beneficial if the agency in conjunction with the exchanges came up with something so we all kind of understood what the rules of the road were, what the framework is for a new token to list on an exchange.
Absolutely. And look, we want to continue to list as much as the market demands, right? And, as long as there's clear guard rules, we do our due diligence. There's hundreds and thousands of projects out there, tens and thousands of tokens. Kraken lists over 400 tokens today. So, we are deliberate about what we bring to the market. And we want to be able to have a framework in place that allows us to keep listing more tokens. And I think the premise is, as long as there's clear disclosures in the market, right? And, our market's subject to all the KYC, AML checks, the market should decide, right? Let the market decide, put disclosures out there. And that's the same approach we've seen, again, in the EU and other major developed markets. Put the disclosures out there, put the rules around the exchanges, and let the market decide.
So what do you think new projects should keep in mind when maybe coming to market and making that debut? What are exchanges like Kraken looking for?
Yeah, I mean, market demand, right?
You have to have some degree of willing buyers.
Willing buyers, and market demand. And of course, we go in and a lot of the due diligence, is the network, cybersecurity, right? We run the due diligence, we run the market demand. But at the end of the day, innovation is about letting the market choose, right? Letting market forces dictate rather than the government dictating or being prescriptive about, what you can and should invest in, which is why getting the financing layer of this right in the United States is so important. And you'll hear from other participants. I think there's been a long legacy of debate with a lot of very bright securities lawyers that want to sort of anchor the discussion about the path forward in the old ways of the securities laws. But the reality is crypto's different.
Why don't the securities laws apply to some of these projects?
Yeah,
because there is a concern, right, of if I'm just some guy wanting to raise money and I slap blockchain or crypto on what I'm doing, I can go do it without fear of regulatory ire.
It's fundamentally about control and ownership. And I think that's where the Senate product that we've seen introduced by the Senate Banking Committee, again, without getting in the detail, gets it right. It's clear and simple and focuses on
how decentralized is this then?
Yes. However, I think the one important thing to understand, all the decentralization, and you've heard, and we've really encouraged this. We've been encouraged to see the SEC chairman, Paul Atkins.
Did you watch his talk?
I heard a little bit about it earlier, but I think the theme to bring out in what he's saying is decentralization is a goal. It is a very important goal for our industry.
We need to let people at least try to achieve that goal.
Absolutely. Yeah. It should not be a legal
that's a starting
ultimatum.
Point.
It should not be a legal ultimatum that is hard-coded into law that creates this bright line consequence of being decentralized or not being decentralized, right? There's a journey to innovation. And so what is ultimately embedded in the law and the market structure bill should allow that journey to take place without consequences that put the US at a competitive disadvantage relative to other markets that haven't over-lawyered, the law.
And you know what's interesting about that is it's really a first principles approach to this market structure, right? Because in the 1934 securities paradigm, it's either black or white. But within crypto, just like everything within crypto, there are lines that are blurred, and a project can start at point A and end up at point B in terms of decentralization or whatever else. And if you don't have a framework that allows for that maturation or that journey, then you never get there. You're kind of throwing the baby out with the bathwater.
Absolutely. And that's why the framework that's put in place with the legislation needs to be flexible, and it needs to allow this industry to continue to develop, right? I mean, we can't do a snapshot today and say, this is where the way the crypto world
This is the
looks,
line.
and here's the line, and we're going to call that a day. It has to be something that can evolve over time, that we continue to develop. I mean, we have tokenized equities coming into the picture, which is going to be a separate story with a separate set of issues. And thankfully, the SEC is moving on with that. Kraken's launched our tokenized equities offering with X stocks. Fascinating debate. You talk about tokenizing segments of the hundreds of trillions of equity market cap out there, and it's a really exciting horizon, for the industry.
So what should people be paying attention to over the course of the next 6 months?
Yeah, so I think near term, next 6 months, it's in the U.S. getting the regulatory clarity that we need on the spot crypto markets, and I think we're finally going to see that with the commitment leadership of Senator Lummis, Senate Banking Chairman Tim Scott, and their colleagues. And then I think over the next 12 to 18 months, you're going to see massive developments on tokenized equities and other real world assets. And the SEC with the crypto task force and Project Crypto that was recently announced, I think they're not waiting, right? They're moving forward, as are other jurisdictions. I mean, Europe's looking carefully at this. We've seen huge demand pockets, the same way you saw stable coins flourish, because there were demand pockets across the world that just did not have ready access to the US dollar, but wanted it. You have demand pockets around the world that want exposure to US equities, that because of the archaic system that's been developed over years, they have not been able to access it. I think tokenized equities is going to allow and unlock some of that demand and access that we haven't seen before.
And obviously in your seat, right? Like, you were in Washington for quite some time. Is this becoming more of a bipartisan issue?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And look, Washington will be Washington. There's going to be partisan aspects of everything, but again, most major G10 markets, we've seen election transitions. Crypto has not been a partisan football. And I think the industry understands that, in order for these to be successful in the long term, good crypto policy cannot be a partisan issue.
And policy is, I think it's easy to argue that this is one of the most unbridled part of the electorate that exists. In terms of people didn't think that single issue crypto voters existed until 2024.
Oh, I think everyone got a big wake up call last year and realized that it is a single issue voter subject. And look, it has been an absolute sea change in this administration. We would not be here without, the leadership and the pivot that we've seen from the Trump administration. And that's been positive, but it takes bipartisan work in Congress in order to get this done. And we can't see an environment where elections change, right?
Yeah.
And parties change. And
well, that's another good question, right? Like, how much of this could potentially be rolled back in a different administration?
It's something that we want to avoid, right? And I think that is why it is so important for this legislation to be bipartisan. We saw an overwhelmingly bipartisan vote on the House market structure bill.
Yeah.
And, we're looking to do the same in the Senate.
Perfect. And hopefully we'll see you before next year in Jackson.
Absolutely.
And we'll let you get back to your busy schedule.
All right. Well, look, thanks,
Jonathan.
Yep. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.